volume. Perfect. Cool. I'm here with Ben Orenstein, and we're going to have a chat in a bit that will eventually become a Product People podcast episode, but we're also streaming live today. So if you are in the chat in the next few minutes or as you listen, feel free to ask us a question, dive right in. That's the one thing I was telling you on, not telling you, but I said on Twitter that the mark of a good podcast is when you are like, I was listening to you guys on Bootstrap Web, and I'm literally like, that last 15 minutes, the whole time I'm like, listen to me. Like I wanted to get in there so bad. It's kind of, anyway, so people can participate, but this will also give me a chance to ask all the questions I want to ask. Hey, Josh.
Right. And then your listeners, our listeners, can actually be listened to during the podcast.
That's right. They've got the opportunity.
I love the live streaming thing because, like, eventually this will be a podcast episode, but you're getting value out of it now. Like, going live out to a whole bunch of people. You're getting a YouTube video out of it, Twitch clips, all this stuff. Yeah.
It has been really good for me. Now, some people don't like this stuff. I love this stuff. To me, this is like, it's kind of like being a stand-up comedian and going to the local club and just being like, okay, I'm going to practice a bunch of material. Mm-hmm. It is not as refined as you might get in a good conference talk or a blog post or a book. But in these moments, like that Bootstrap Web episode, that you guys had a good conversation, and then the last 13 minutes was dynamite. That's where it's like, that's the best stuff right there. All of the pretense is kind of gone. You're saying how you really feel. It's getting a little bit heated. And that working out of material back and forth, Jordan's saying one thing, and then you're saying another thing, and Brian's saying another thing. That's the material that becomes great blog posts and conference talks and everything else. So, at least in my experience.
I find a lot of times on podcasts, it takes a little while for them to warm up.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if the people know each other well, or like they're just like good at that, like some people are better at it than others or have more practice. But a lot of the times it's like, you may as well just cut the first 15 minutes.
Yeah. Have you found it, because you've been doing interviews for a long time, have you figured out tricks? One trick, like I've got a good question to kick us off once we get going that I think will get us right into the meat. But the hard thing I've always found is like you always want background because you're like, if some people don't know this person, I got to get their story.
I don't think that matters that much.
Okay.
Like that's how most people start off podcast interviews is they go, so Ben, why don't you tell us about yourself? And that question is hard.
Yeah.
Like it puts a lot of pressure on you, and it immediately makes it feel like a one-way interview.
Yes.
And so when I was doing interviews, I would never ask that. I would try to not ask that question.
Yeah.
Or like I would maybe provide my own background, be like, oh, so like I know you do a lot of things. You do X, Y, Z. That's really cool. Or just kind of skip it because it sort of doesn't matter. Like if the people listen to the podcast and they like listen for 10 minutes, they're like, I like this guy. He seems to make sense. This is interesting. Maybe they will go learn more. But a bunch of it just comes out from context anyway.
Yes. Okay. Well, now I want to dig into this a little bit because here's a counterpoint. I'll just paste it into there for you, but I'll show everybody else on my screen. Terry Gross, who's some people say is the best interviewer ever. She says her advice is to ask, tell me about yourself. And I'll see if I can find this exact.
So like, here's like, so if you have an interview with Terry Gross on NPR, you're appearing on like one of like the biggest talk shows in the world, right?
Yeah.
You're in a studio. There's probably multiple people in the studio with you. You're seated in an unfamiliar place. There's no way you're going to fool yourself into thinking like you're not about to be interviewed in a serious interview way.
Yeah.
Right? So like in that situation, like if you're about to go appear on Terry Gross's show, you probably have a really good answer for, tell me about yourself.
Yes.
You're anticipating this. But on podcasts, it's like you can make it feel more personal. Like if I squint hard enough, I can just feel like you and I are just chatting, and
Yeah.
like everyone else doesn't matter.
Wait a second. Dig into that a bit. What do you mean squint enough?
I just like I can kind of trick myself into like not thinking about anybody else listening.
Interesting.
Like especially on my podcast, like when I record with Derek, like I'm aware always of the audience. Like I never get to like, oh man, this is literally just us talking. But like the more I do it, the more I'm just like, Derek says something interesting and I ask him a question about it. And then like I say something, he asks me a question about that. And like it's kind of just two friends having a conversation. And I'm not thinking like we are making podcast now.
Weird. See, my problem is, and I realize that sometimes performance Justin is not as good as vulnerable, real Justin.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tension there, though, which is part of this is entertainment.
Yeah.
But a lot of the good stuff happens when we let down our guard, when we stop using our podcast voice and we start talking like human beings. But so do you have a tension between those two things? Are you thinking, okay, I want to be entertaining? Or are you just thinking, no, if the conversation is good and real, the entertainment just happens?
Definitely the latter for me. Like there are lots of really amazing, highly produced podcasts that are carefully crafted entertainment vehicles.
Yeah.
And people do that. Some people do that amazingly well. And so if you want that, that's totally a thing. I'm not that interested in making that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in being like, here is the good and the bad of what's going on with me and my actual real life story, pretty unfiltered and not dolled up that much.
Yeah. 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 I think you're right. It's
not right or wrong. This is just what I like doing.
I know, and I guess part of me, so I actually have this idea for a podcast, which is called something like Uninvited Guest. And the whole idea is inviting yourself to a podcast conversation that you were never a part of. So afterwards, like playing the clip and saying, okay, but what about this? You didn't ask this. Mm-hmm. And Malcolm Gladwell has a new podcast called there's a new episode with Rick Rubin.
Okay. And
Rick Rubin is talking about how he worked with Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash is playing just like old small theaters, like hotel nightclubs. His label didn't care about him. Everyone had forgotten about him. And Rick Rubin was looking for a challenge. He wanted to he'd only worked with new artists, and he wanted to find an old artist and kind of breathe new life into them. And so he's thinking, who's like this? Who's kind of like not doing so hot? And Johnny Cash came up. And his idea was to record a bunch of covers with Johnny. So there's that famous Nine Inch Nails cover. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yep.
Hurt. And I mean, if you listen to it, it's just haunting. I remember when that came out, and I had heard of Johnny Cash before, but that was when I became a fan, was watching Rick Rubin's thing. Okay, here's the part I want to ask you about. So Rick said that his whole objective was not to show people the real Johnny Cash, but was to show them the man in black, this mythical, heroic person. So he didn't want any funny songs. You know, Johnny has a good sense of humor. He has like a Boy Named Sue and some other songs like that. But he just wanted, I want this old kind of night rider wearing black. He's been to prison. He shot a man in Reno. That's the figure I want. And one thing I've struggled with as someone who writes blog posts and does podcasts and does videos like you, right? Mm-hmm. Is how much do people want a mythical figure and how much do they want the real person? And I'm contrived about it because on one hand, I think I respond to vulnerability and, it's nice to hear people be themselves. But on the other hand, people sometimes like their preconceived notions of the people they read and the people they watch and the people they listen to. So do you care about any of that, or is that not even enter your mind?
I can't pretend I don't have any concern about that. Like I am human and I care what other people think about me, even as I try not to.
Yeah.
Like I try to not let it dominate what I'm doing, but it's a real hard instinct to ignore.
Yes.
But I feel like as you're talking, I'm thinking like you had a couple posts you published recently where you're like, I'm feeling kind of apprehensive about publishing this.
Yes.
And then it blows up and
Yeah.
it resonates because there's authenticity in it.
Yes.
I think that's worth paying attention to.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, have humans changed? As in, okay, have you listened to the Joe Rogan interview with Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins?
No.
Okay, you've got to listen to it. Everyone watching live right now. By the way, tons of folks are saying hi. Hi, Ben. Love the podcast. Looking forward to Tuple. Can't wait for Tuple. So
Thanks.
If you're not seeing those, people are.
I am seeing him.
Perfect.
And thanks to both of you for that.
So this interview with Billy Corgan is so fascinating because you get to see the real person. So when you think Billy Corgan, you think like dour, dark, depressed, emo, the Smashing Pumpkins dude. And they talk about that tension a little bit more. And again, maybe this is actually where maybe we can slice into your life a little bit more, which is, programmers are programmers rock stars? Because and how much of that is true? How much of that do we care about? I'm not talking about like rock star programmer, but as in the heroes, as in the people on stage. How much should we be playing into that? Because Billy Corgan is saying, I have a clear separation between my public persona, the person you see on stage. I want people to believe the fantasy, and the private person. And to be honest, I don't know if this is true, but, I think 37 Signals had a little bit of this early on, whether it was on purpose or not, was people had this fantasy about the life they lived or the way they were, but it was disconnected from the real human stuff. So there's a bunch in here. Maybe first of all, I'm wrestling with this because no one ever talks about it. Like, are we public figures? Should we be trying to do that? When we say we're building an audience and that's an asset, does that mean... What does that mean? Do you kind of get what I'm going at here?
I think so. To me, honestly, the answer feels like it can be, you can do what you want.
Yeah.
Like, I think, so do you remember Zed Shaw?
Yes.
All right. So Zed Shaw, did this in the programmer world where he had this, cranky programmer persona.
Yeah.
And it resonated with a lot of people. And I sort of remember him, writing a blog post later being like, I sort of crafted this persona, but then people have this weird view of me, and in reality I'm not quite such a cranky person. And
yeah,
he started doing things that weren't blog posts with people playing electric guitars and things like that. So I think you can just decide that's who you want to be. There's this Twitch streamer, Dr. Disrespect. Do you know him?
No.
So there's this guy. So he plays games. He streams games, and he just has this alter ego. I don't even know his real name.
Yeah.
But it's just he's this guy. He created a character to play games with who's really ornery and thinks a lot of himself and is really braggy. And he's really fun and really entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
Because the character is interesting and it's fun to see the character run into situations live and react to it and get pissed at the game and all this. And then there are people that stream games and are just themselves, or you and me streaming this and we're just us.
Yeah.
And people dig both. And so I really honestly think you just got to figure out what you want to do. I'm okay with my podcast audience being only the people that really like what I do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think about how do we change our podcast so that more people will listen to it. I
Yeah.
just think like, how do I put something out that I feel good about and hopefully get it exposed to the people that are into that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a good. One thing I wanted to ask you is, why are you doing this? I mean, not this right now, but why are you building? You're building Tuple.app, which is a screen sharing application. You're doing artofproductpodcast.com, which is your podcast. You're doing Habits for Hackers. What's motivating you? Like, why are you doing any of this? And maybe talk a little bit about why you felt like you needed to leave paid employment to do all that.
I've actually felt for a while that running my own software company would be my like eventual destiny. And so a lot of the things that I have done over the years have been with that kind of in the back of my mind, like thinking like, how do I get ready for this so that when I try it eventually, it's more likely to be a success. Mm-hmm. And so like I was a programmer for many years, and then I like started a company, I guess, a division, a product inside Thoughtbot. And I was like, this is great because this is like training while getting paid a developer salary on how to start a small company.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm all about freedom and flexibility and newness, like variability, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to have my own thing because then I can set my own hours. I can do it how I want. I don't have a boss. And also it's just like, it'll be different and weird and hard. And I like that. Like every so often I have to kind of blow up what I've got and then like try a new kind of scary thing for me to stay like really engaged.
Yeah. And so is that the why? Is that you just feel like I gotta scare myself a bit. I gotta get uncomfortable.
I guess so. I mean, you got to do something right with the day, and like, I don't know, like it's like just slacking off doesn't make me satisfied.
Yeah.
And like working for somebody else doesn't like keeps me kind of satisfied, but not really. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of just felt like this is what I'm going to do during the daytime.
Yeah. And how much of it is, because I definitely had that motivation. Like I can remember, and I share this image a lot, but I think a lot of folks who are probably listening to this can identify. They're in their car right now. They're at a red light listening to our voices. And they feel so frustrated to be in that car, to be commuting to work, to be dealing with their boss, to be, maybe they've got great work, great boss, but they just don't have, they feel like they're missing something. And in terms of, you know, I really like Rob Walling's 3 things: purpose, freedom, and relationships. You know, maybe they feel like in those 3 things, I don't have the purpose I want at work. I don't have the freedom. And then someone on Twitter said something similar to you. They said, you know, giving you a business, owning your own business doesn't really give you freedom. It gives you flexibility.
Yeah.
And I disagree with that a little bit. I think it definitely gives you freedom from some things. Like, I am free from a 1-hour commute. I feel a lot of freedom. Now, there's flexibility in there too, but so I identify with all that. And, yeah, but on the other hand, the other thing for me was always like, there's this other motivation, and I just don't know how if other people have this or what, like how it interacts with you, but there's just like this very real, like, I got to provide for my family. I got to put food on the table. I got to do all this other stuff. And so do you feel like you're free from that stress? Like, do you worry about money? Do you worry about the future? Do you know, right now I think you're working off your savings, right?
That's right.
Like, does that stress you out?
Yeah, a little bit. So we started in May, and back then we're like agreed that we, like the 3 of us, I have 2 co-founders, and it was like, okay, we each have like a year of runway at least that we're comfortable spending on this. And so for the first handful of months, it's like, yeah, that's like plenty of money. But then every month it goes down. Yeah. And like, you're like, this number's only going down. That's kind of a bummer. Yeah. And like a
wait
pile
a second,
of money.
Do you feel like it's just kind of a bummer, or like, is that your honest feeling about it? Or are you kind of like, I mean, I don't know how much money you have. You could be sitting on $1 million bones for all I know.
No, I'm not. Definitely not. So like, it was stressing me out a lot more like a month ago.
Okay.
Because so like I basically there's like 3 buckets of money that I have right now. There's like checking account. There's like short-term savings that I put together for basically this.
Okay.
That was like, and then there was like
can you give us a rough idea? Like, was that 3 months worth of expenses, or 6 or 12 or?
So at one point it was like probably like 14 months or something.
Okay.
14 to 16 months in that range, depending on how crazy I was. And I actually spent more than I probably should have. So it's probably more like a year. Okay.
And how did you calculate that? Was it, this is just what the bare minimum of what I need to feed myself and pay rent?
No, it was more. I was like, okay, assuming I have roughly the same lifestyle minus 20% or something, figuring I cut back on the more extravagant things.
Okay.
Is roughly where that number came from.
Okay. And you're in Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it expensive there, or is it pretty reasonable?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I live in, so like my rent is like $1,300 a month.
Okay.
So it's pretty pricey.
Yeah, pretty pricey. All right. So you have 14 months. Oh, sorry. You have 3 buckets of money under your bag.
Yeah. So there's 3 buckets. There's the like, okay, I've been putting aside money for a number of years, and this is like the bucket of like, go do something interesting.
How many years did you save up?
I've been a pretty decent saver for a while. I guess it's been like maybe 5 years or something.
Okay. I know, sorry, I keep interrupting you, but can you go into like how, like, what was your habit? We're talking habits for hackers. By the way, one habit I would love to learn, I know it's probably not part of your program, but those kind of financial habits I'm very interested in. Yeah. And so what financial habit did you get into over those 5 years that allowed you to save that much money?
The thing that made the biggest difference for me is a thing I think I stole from Ramit Sethi. Yeah. That I Will Teach You to Be a Rich Guy, was to automate saving. Okay. So I basically set up direct deposit so that some portion of my paycheck went into retirement fund, some portion went into like short-term savings, and then the rest went into my actual checking account. Yeah. And nothing made as big a difference as that one thing right there.
Yeah. My problem, once I went independent, I was just like, money comes into your business account, and then when you need money, you just withdraw it, right? There's not an automated thing there. It should be like that. And there's no banking tools that will automatically detect deposits and then automate the saving.
Not that I'm aware of.
Because that's what I would like. But,
that'd be cool.
And the other thing, if anyone from Stripe is listening, I think that tell me if this is even a problem for you too, but the one thing that feels like would be an amazing add-on for Stripe is the ability to split payouts. So like if you're going to do some of that automated stuff or Profit First or any of those systems, man, it would be nice to right at the Stripe level, just be able to go bloop, and then like put it in this account, or even for partners, like you could, I mean, for a long-term project, it wouldn't work, but short-term little projects, like if you had a partner on Habits for Hackers and you're like, okay, all the money coming into this account should get split up between us automatically at the payout stage, that'd be amazing. Anyway, okay, so
that'd be cool.
The adding the automation part was the big part. Yeah.
Yep, that was the biggest thing. So you were asking about stress, and like I was stressed like I don't know, a month or two ago about it, because like the number just kept going down. Basically, so I have that bucket of short-term savings. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, if I want to, I can take cash out of my Roth IRA, because that's a post-tax savings account, meaning like I can take out the money I put into it with no penalty at any time. So it's like, okay, I can start pulling from that bucket if I run out of the first one. Yeah. And then if that one gets empty, then I can like, if you want, you can do a loan from your 401k to yourself. Yes. And then without paying a penalty. And so it's like, okay, so like I have these like 3 buckets, but everything past the first bucket feels crappy. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to spend retirement money or even like loan against retirement money. That's just like a little bit too sketchy for me. But if it was like, okay, this thing is going to looks like it's working and like I just need a couple more months, then maybe, but it's like it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so I was like looking at the short-term thing. I was like, okay, I'm like, it's been May, now it's almost December, so it's been 7 months or something.
Okay.
So it's like that number is getting lower every month.
Yeah.
And so I was feeling a little more stressed, but then like, I don't know, a couple things happened. So like one is like I did a Black Friday sale for like one of my courses that I had made.
Yeah.
And like honestly the easiest, laziest, simplest version of it, and made like $6,000
Yeah.
in a couple days, which is pretty great. Black Friday is legit. Thank you all of those people who bought my course.
But by the way, some people get cranky about Black Friday, like they don't like the emails and the commercialism or whatever. I totally get that, but for an independent creator to get some money at the end of the year, especially like December and January can be like really bad. It is so helpful. Like there's a difference between a Black Friday sale on Amazon and getting Ben Orenstein's Black Friday sale. Like it really helps those independents.
Mm-hmm.
So the sales helped a little bit.
Yeah, the sales helped a little bit. I also like scheduled a little bit of coaching. Like someone reached out to me for some coaching.
Okay.
And I was just like, how about like high number per hour? And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then also like Habits for Hackers is very much like part of this, where it's like I have time on the side. Like I actually like building Tuple, is my main focus for sure. But like I still have plenty of evening and weekend time. And so like Habits for Hackers is basically my side hustle to like rebuild some of that runway.
Yeah.
So between those things, I was kind of like, okay, I think I'm actually feeling pretty okay about that. So I haven't been stressing about money recently.
All right. What about? I mean, I know you probably can't talk too much, but what about your partners? Like, were they in a similar situation? They had a bunch of savings. That's pretty unusual to find 3 people with a bunch of runway like that.
It totally is. Yeah. I mean, part of that was just like luck.
Yeah.
I didn't like screen for that ahead of time, but then when we finally had that like the financial conversation, it was like, oh yeah, we can all do this. And it's kind of like, I think there's something maybe kind of important there, like an important lesson, where it was like suddenly it was like, okay, it's time to talk about who's going to be a co-founder of this thing. And fortunately, we all had enough runway that it was like, okay, we can just do this. But if one of us had been like, yeah, I can't stop working, they'd be like, well, I guess you probably can't be a co-founder then.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like if you are, I'm a lucky person, and I'll admit that. But like, if you are also a lucky person, and you're like a single person making a software developer salary, and you don't accumulate significant savings, you're kind of missing out on an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
Like you got to get serious about putting aside money, because someday, like, so that money that I put in the bank, like that my short-term savings, I didn't know what it was for.
Yeah.
I just kept doing it. And I was like, I don't know like when I'm going to need this money, but I'm never going to be sad I have it.
Yeah.
And then one day it was like, oh, it's for this. Great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I have this pile of cash. And like
you
you have
ready.
that opportunity.
Yeah.
So do it. Don't just like, it's so easy to just like accidentally or just like automatically spend everything. And then have like very little for this kind of thing. So like it's worth putting a little effort into building that up.
Totally. And I think that the challenge for me has always been, I'm kind of having a reckoning right now, because my attitude was, I got a big family, which is totally my fault. But I got a big family, and families are expensive, and kids are expensive, and I was always using that as an excuse. And all those things are true, but it doesn't change the realities of life, which are, if you can have some money set aside, any money set aside, it is better than not having any. And the one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, when things were good, I went independent in 2016, selling mostly marketing for developers, Mega Maker, the membership site, all these things. And when revenue was great, man, it was great. It was like, every month I have so much money left over, and surprisingly, that money got spent. Now, some of it got spent. This is the one thing that's difficult, is that, and I've been pretty open about this, I got really depressed in 2017. And I had a bunch of money in the business bank account, but when you get taken out of commission as a solo person, you can wipe that stuff out really, well, not quickly. It happened over months. And so, yeah, I think the lesson is still cash rules the day, whether in personal life or your business. The more cash you have, the better. And if you don't have any cash, you're severely limited in all sorts of ways.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got a question from Sid here.
Mm-hmm.
How do folks feel? Whoa, this is a really big thumbnail. Let me try to make that smaller. How do you folks feel about Tiny Seed? I feel like it could remove a lot of stress that you're talking about. And this is the piece I wanted to talk about that you guys got into on the Bootstrap Web podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about Tiny Seed. There's also Earnest Capital. And you had a comment that I didn't quite understand. So I want you to unpack it a little bit. Actually, I'm going to play that clip for everybody. I already played it for you before. But I'm going to play that clip for everybody, and then that'll give us a break. And then
sure.
we can come back in a minute here to discuss it. So here, I'll play that right now.
So you don't have anything to lose, because if you want to pay us back, if it's really successful, just give us back 3x, and we don't even own any equity. Right? They're trying to make the pitch to you where you don't really have that much to lose. If it's really successful, you just pay them back. If it's not successful, then you didn't burn your life savings. It's like, I don't know. My argument is like, if someone's going to give you money under those terms, you take it, baby, and you run.
I do think that's a pretty good argument. The one thing that I would push back on is either you or they are buying equity with dollars. So like you could say like, it sucks that I'm spending my savings, but I don't think of it that way so much. Like, yes, that money is going towards rent and food, but the thing it's really actually doing is buying my time so that I can hang on to equity. If I sell equity to somebody for dollars, it's because they think those dollars are worth less than the equity.
Okay, I'm going to bring back our volumes back up. So in that clip, you said, you're kind of saying like, if they want to buy equity, something to the effect of they think their dollars are worth less than the equity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So, right. So this isn't a position I agree with 100%. This is just sort of one counter argument I was presenting to what Jordan was saying.
Yeah.
So like I'll make the argument and then I'll also talk about why it maybe is not totally true.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to invest in your company, they're like, yo, we want to buy 10% of your company for $100,000.
Okay.
In their mind, they're saying 10% of this company is going to be worth more than $100,000.
Yes.
Right? Otherwise, they would not do the deal.
Yeah.
And when you sell them 10% of your company, you're thinking that $100,000 is worth more than 10% of my company. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the deal.
Yes.
Right? So like one of you is possibly wrong.
Yes. And only one of us can be wrong.
So this is why I think this argument is maybe not so good, as I've thought about it more since then, is that actually both of you can basically be right. So if this investor can help you make the company worth more, either just by this cash injection or by like mentoring you later, neither of you really has to lose here.
Yeah.
Like they can end up with 10% of a bigger pie, and you can turn those $100,000 into more, your 90% is worth more after the fact.
Yeah.
So it's not really like zero sum in reality. It felt zero sum when I was sort of on the podcast thinking about it at first, but I think I agree with it less and less the more I think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny how perspective all depends on the situation you're in. When I was, in 2016 and 2017, when I was flying high and I felt like I had lots of money, I was really anti-investment. Like, no way. Who needs money? Like, money's easy to get, right? And, even in that conversation, you've got you, and then you've got Brian, and then you've got Jordan. And Jordan is saying, if someone wants to give you money and increase the runway that you have and increase your chances of survival, then take it. Take the money. That's helpful. But, Brian has this productized service going that I think is, paying him enough money to work on other things. You've got savings right now. And so you two are like, I don't really get it. Right? Like, is this worth
I wouldn't
it?
say I don't get it.
Yeah.
But it's slightly less attractive for me than it might be for other people.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, so Sid is asking about Tiny Seed, and Tiny Seed does, from what I understand, take an equity position. They buy some of your company. The interesting thing about Earnest is they don't take an equity position. Let's say they give you $100,000. They want a 3 to 5x payout at the end. And that to me is interesting. Initially, I was thinking, man, but that's still like, would that just be weighing on you? Like you finally make money, and then every time you make another $1,000, you're like, I got to pay Earnest out, But this is, and you alluded to this in your conversation earlier, and this might become more, is it prescient? Prescient? How do you say that?
Sure, prescient. I think.
Prescient? It might become more
so.
prescient as your money goes down. The runway is so important, and sometimes I feel like right now, because my runway's gotten shorter and shorter,
Yeah.
I feel like, that cartoon where they're on the train and they're just putting tracks in front of the train as it goes? Like that position is such a crappy position to be in, where you're always like, like got to get the tracks in front of the train. And so now, if people could probably go back into my, old blog posts and Twitter tweets and see all the negative things I said about investment, but now I'm like, well, maybe getting some money would be good, So yeah, it really depends on your context. What I'm trying to look at is rationally, and this is why your argument was interesting to me, was what are the rational reasons you wouldn't want to take that kind of investment, whether it's an equity position like Tiny Seed or Indie VC, or this new model that's being proposed by Earnest. And the only disadvantage in my head, again, I'm kind of dumb with this stuff. So even like as you're talking about like value of money now and value of money in the future, my brain gets a little bit like shuts off a little bit. And so it's hard for me to make those decisions. Like, what am I giving up now that I might regret later?
Yeah. So I think it's a complicated question. I don't think there's a right answer. But some of the things that I think about are like, do you need the money? So if it's like Tiny Seed's pitch on their landing page seems to be, you can quit your job and focus full time on this new business. And that is a good value proposition for a lot of people, because they're like, they don't have enough savings to just quit now, or that feels too risky for them. They have too many dependents or something.
Yeah.
And so that's like, okay, I can get enough funding to work for a year on my thing. That's great.
Yeah.
For me, that's like slightly less compelling because of my situation.
Yeah.
And then like also like, what would you, so if you're slightly more in my position, it's like, okay, what would I use the funding for? It's like, do we want to hire somebody? Like, could we take that money and turn it into customers quickly, or progress, like faster progress, or a superior product or something? And so that's like another thing to consider. And these are all like, I don't know, they're all hard questions, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you just, and then like those are the benefits. Like, what are the drawbacks? Like, how does it change the business when you have an investor? I don't actually know. I haven't dealt with that before.
Yeah.
But I've heard from other people who have that it can be tricky. Like, it can be tough. Like, if I want to build a small company and then go on to the next thing and just let it pay my bills for a while, like, that's fine if I own all of it and my co-founders are down with it. But if we have an investor, suddenly it's like there's someone else at the table, and it's like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm screwing somebody and like not acting in their best interest. And so now I feel guilt around running my business the way I want to. And so there's just like a lot of different competing ideas here.
Yeah. And you know what's helpful is just I think it's helpful for people to be honest, and maybe this goes back to our previous conversation about, how should people represent themselves online. I think it's helpful for people to just be honest about their situation. And sometimes, and maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I do see this tendency for everyone to kind of want to fit into the same mold, and that's a very human thing. So, to all have the same kind of bravado around a certain topic, or all have the same kind of tone around a certain topic, where the real answer is it all depends on your situation. Like that's it. And, I think what I'm trying to be more honest about now is to look at people in the eyes virtually and say, I'm not in a good situation. Like, if you can avoid the situation I'm in, please do. And because it's a lot harder for a lot of reasons, right? At the same time, I don't want to give up on myself. I'm going to have to figure out what I do. But the willingness to almost ignore or keep the other signals away and just go, okay, Justin, or okay, Ben, what's your situation right now? What do you want? Like, where are you trying to go? And then instead of saying, oh, what I want was really similar to what Jason Fried wanted back in 2004, so I better go check out what he did and what worked for him and what blog post he wrote then, and then I'm going to try to not just do what he did, but capture some of that spirit, or capture some of that bravado, or capture some of that status, because so much of this has to do with ego and status. Saying, no, what is your situation? And the honesty of that, just for yourself, is I've found difficult, but I think that's the truth, that everybody who's doing this thing is going to have to figure out their own journey. And the hard thing about this, especially when you have co-founders like you and I do, is it's not just you on this journey, it's them. And they have things they want. They have things they are struggling with that you don't know about. So how have you dealt with that, by the way? How have you been open with each other about like that stuff? Do you have a safe word? Like, I'm struggling? Or like,
so we do a retro just about every week.
Okay.
And literally one of the questions in our retro is anyone struggling with anything?
Yeah.
And it's intentionally worded that way, like sort of general, so that people have an opportunity to bring stuff up like that.
Yeah. And how do you, was it hard being that honest, or did you already have rapport with these people where you felt like, so, I don't know if this was a talk at MicroConf, but I don't know how public he's been about it. But there's a founder that we both know that was in a co-founder situation with two other founders, and unbeknownst to his co-founders, he was working really long hours. He was putting money on his credit card to pay for expenses. And he basically got to a point where it was like, and he hadn't communicated any of this to his co-founders. Yeah. And so when it came out, they were like, what are you doing? Like, and I don't, who knows why that happened, but did you have enough rapport before that you could get that vulnerable? And
I think so.
How do you look for that? Like, was that just...
So I have two co-founders, Joel and Spencer, and Joel I've known for like 6 years now. So we sang together in the same chorus.
Okay.
And became friends and have been on camping trips and all this. Like we're close.
Yeah.
And so I had that pretty much right away with Joel. And Spencer is pretty open book. He's willing to share.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm fortunate that we have a pretty. It seems like you never know. Like I feel like people like you think you have the open line of communication, and then suddenly you find out there was this thing that's been festering for 6 months.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe that will happen to us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think we have that sort of open lines.
Are there habits or weekly questions or ways of drawing that out when you're in a co-founder situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pull up my retro template and I'll just tell you the questions we ask, because one of them is about finances. So we start with, since our last retro, what's gone well? And I like starting with that because it puts us off on kind of a positive note, and it kind of forces us all to say these are the good things that are happening.
Yeah.
Then we review my KPI dashboard, just like the numbers I'm focused on right now, which is right now revenue in the last week and number of Twitter followers and that I have, and new subscribers to the mailing list.
Okay.
So you can tell. You can tell I'm focused on sales and marketing.
Yes.
That's what that is. And then it's how do we feel about the following things? Number 1, the projects we're focused on. Number 2, our productivity and work-life balance. And number 3, our financial health. Okay. So we hit finances every week. It's how is everyone feeling about literally how much money we have, how much the money the company has, how much money we're spending, all that stuff.
Interesting. So just to review, I wrote these down for the folks in the chat. What's gone well?
Yep, since our last retro. Yep.
KPI dashboard, and you're only reviewing your KPIs.
For now, yeah, we don't have development KPIs at the moment, but we've talked about doing them, and I think we eventually will add them. Mm-hmm. For us, Tuple's whole thing, or one of our core value things, is that we want Tuple to be crazy fast and have really really low latency. Yeah. So I'd like to have a KPI dashboard that's what is the current latency numbers?
Gotcha.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
So I could see us adding that pretty soon.
And then how do you feel about the projects you're working on, work-life balance, and finances? Yep. So what happens if someone says, I'm assuming everyone's being honest. Do you feel like people are being honest enough? I think so. So work-life balance, someone might say, you know what? I was working on this thing yesterday and it burnt me out.
Yeah. So
if I said that, this is a good example. If we were doing this, I would say, and John and I are pretty good at this, but I answered, we had a big support queue for Transistor, 20 or 30 it's basically, we were so busy. He's busy on Black Friday with Cards Against Humanity's crazy Black Friday sale, and I'm busy on my own Black Friday sale. So I finally get to this queue, and it's exhausting. I went through all of these support queues, and at the end of the day, I just felt burnt out. So let's say today we're having our retro, and you say, hey, Justin, how's your work-life balance? And go, oh, man, I don't know. I went through all that stuff yesterday, and I just feel burnt out. Mm-hmm. What would the response of the other co-founders be? Do you have, how do you react?
I think we would react and say well, do you feel like you want to take some time? What sounds good for you right now? Do you need to take the day off, the week off? Do you want to go climbing instead of working today?
Yeah.
What sounds good? We're in this for the long haul. I'm interested in the long game. I'm not interested in a startup sprint.
Yeah.
I want to make good software over time and grow slowly. And so it's if you over the short term sprinted too hard, you need a break. Doesn't seem like a problem at all to me.
Yeah. And are those the kinds of things you're keeping an eye on?
Totally.
How put together are you guys really? Are you guys thinking about this stuff all the time, or how much intention did you bring into this? Were these things you talked about from the beginning going, listen, that thing you just said, I'm not interested in the sprint. That's something you had, a conversation you had early.
Totally. Yeah, that was one of the things. So that was one of our very earliest conversations. It was kind of what's our philosophy? What kind of company do we want to build together?
Yeah.
It's do we want to grow fast? Do we want to raise a bunch of money? Do we want to what are our aspirations for how big it gets and how much money it makes and all that stuff? and we were on the same page for that for sure.
Just
and that was partly why we did it. It was just like we agreed, like our answers were similar enough on this.
Yeah. How long did that take, by the way, for you to have all those conversations? Like from the beginning of, hey, do you want to build a replacement for Screen Hero, to, you signing the corporate documents? Like how long was that?
So I knew Joel really well, and so I was already pretty on board with like we'd had enough conversations over months that it was like, okay, we're pretty compatible here. And so it's hard to track like how much time was total spent on that. But then like Spencer was kind of a later add. It was like, okay, Joel and I were like, all right, we're going to start this company. We're going to quit our jobs and do this. And at that moment, Spencer like reached out to Joel and was like, hey, I just quit my job. Like, what are you up to?
Yeah.
And so Joel was like, yo, I have this guy that worked at my last startup who's great. And he's suddenly free and has a bunch of savings. And we should chat with him. And so that was more intentional. And we talked to Spencer, and we like there was one big conversation, I feel like, where it's like, okay, let's talk about like what you think you want to do, and if you did build a company, what you would want it to look like and what motivates you. And it was just kind of like we had a couple drinks and chatted for a few hours and just sort of saw if we were on the same page or not.
That's interesting, especially since you two, like you and Joel, knew each other quite well. And then you're bringing in this other person kind of later.
Yeah.
But so you felt like it was just over drinks? Like, okay, are you all in? Oh, you're all in Boston.
We're all in Boston.
That's not going to work for a remote pair programming app, man.
Well, hey, we don't all live together. So like right now, Joel and Spencer are using it. They're both working from home. So
yeah. I think one of you needs to move to the Bay Area for this to work.
Yeah. Well, I have a good friend in Hong Kong, and so it's like, okay, we'll use Tuple between you and me and see how that goes, because if it works between here and Hong Kong, we're good.
Yeah. To really test this out, you're going to need to. Yeah. What's I was reminded of Tuple yesterday because in a Slack that I'm in, they posted some of those funny pair programming videos, like the funny ones. What do you feel like? Does pair programming have a little bit of a bad rep?
Probably yes. I think it's like, what is it like? I think there are certain things in life that are easy to have bad experiences with if you do them with people that aren't very good at them.
Yes. That's actually a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. Some examples are popping to mind, but they're not safe for podcasts.
Well, one thing that popped to mind instantly was, I was really, for a while, a part of my career, I was really bitter about working for companies. And my friend Jathan took me out for lunch one time. He's like, why are you bagging on working for companies? You've just had a bad experience. Like there are some good companies that are worth working for. You can't just paint this whole thing with this brush because you had a bad experience.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think pair programming is susceptible to that.
Yeah.
Because you do it like with one or two people and you're like, oh, that was terrible. I didn't like that. I hate pair programming.
Yeah.
And lots of people are not that good at pair programming. So it's easy to accidentally, unknowingly pair with someone that's not good at it and have a bad experience.
Who's bad at it?
It's just very natural as humans. It's a common bias to sort of over extrapolate from a limited experience, particularly if that experience is like embarrassing, which like someone who's a bad pair can make you feel stupid.
Yeah.
And that is such a bad feeling. It like feels terrible. And so you're just like, oh, pairing is the worst. Like I feel stupid when I pair program, and I'm never doing that again.
So is it a tone thing? Like, so I sit next to somebody and they see me using tabs instead of spaces and then they criticize me. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Or like, oh, we should use this sort of database, whatever. And you're like, what is that? You're like, you don't know about how transactions work?
Yeah.
It's just like that kind of thing, that like feigned surprise is just like you should know that thing. Like, how do you not know that?
Yes.
It's just like it's very unfortunately common among programmers, and so it like could happen pretty easily, I think.
Is that something you've written about? I'm just showing on screen here this guide you wrote to pair programming. Is that something you talk about, like tone And
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
is that pair programming anti-patterns? Is that what?
That's definitely one of them. But I wrote an article called, what is it? How to Pair with a Junior Dev.
Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah.
And this actually secretly applies to most pair programming sessions, but it's particularly important when you're pairing with someone who's new to it, so you don't give them this crappy experience the first time.
Yes.
Like an early time. But yeah, like sort of having empathy for the person you're pairing with. And like, I feel like anyone who's been at this for a while realizes that there's so much to learn in programming that everyone has blind spots. And some of those blind spots sound surprising because like, how have you not bumped into needing transactions in databases or like learned about that yet?
Mm-hmm.
But once you've been at it for a while, you realize you have those too. Everyone does. There's just too much to learn all of it.
Yeah.
And so you should like, I feel like confident, secure, experienced people never respond negatively when you tell them you don't know something.
Yes.
Like that is such a sign of an insecure, inexperienced jerk.
Yeah.
That like it's instant. You know what that person's all about if they do that, and it's not good.
Does it? I'm gonna say something that might be bad, but the stereotype is that programmers as a group maybe suffer a lack of empathy or suffer from some of this tone problem. Is it a cultural thing? Is this a real problem, or is this just a perception that's not real?
I bet it's more common in programmers than in other groups, partly because I think in programming, so much of your worth, it's easy to get your self-worth wrapped up in like how smart you are and how much you know. Yeah. And so when you see other people that like don't know a thing, it's easy to kind of score points. Like this is the metric that we use in programming. Yeah. It's just like how smart is your brain? Yes. And so like becomes the way to score points. But also I think programming to some extent attracts kind of nerdy, kind of socially outcasty, sometimes sort of socially inept people. Not always, for sure, but I think it has a higher proportion than most fields. And so if you're insecure and the way you make yourself feel better is by showing how smart you are, then a great way to make yourself feel a little better is to show someone else how you're smarter than they are. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just, I bet this shows up a lot of the times. I think this is just like a common human thing, but I think in programming it's probably more common than average.
Yeah. Is there a way of, like, because this, I hadn't seen this one yet. This guide's great, by the way. You can get to it from the Tuple homepage. You scroll to the bottom, and there's a question that says, have you written any amazing guides about pair programming? And you just I have
a better way of getting there.
Okay, what's that?
Learntopair.com.
Oh, learntopair.com. Okay, I'll put that on screen here. Cool. So I like this part with the junior developers because I've been trying to teach myself some programming. And I'm wondering, is there and I'm sure with Thoughtbot and other places you've had to pair with junior people. My question is about, so programming has always had this like mystical thing in my head, which is like, it's this black box. I don't understand it. It seems like it's all magic. It's all unknowable. And part of it, what I'm uncovering more and more is that part of it is exactly what you've talked about. Like there's this almost status from knowing things and knowing things the way they've always been known. So it's like, communicating things in a certain way, in a certain mindset, using certain metaphors. And if you don't click with that, or if you don't get that right away, or if that is really kind of mystical in the beginning, doesn't matter. You just got to become part of the club. You got to know the lingo. You've got to know all that stuff. And I'm realizing, wait a second, some of this stuff I thought was black magic is just the way that they're communicating it. It's just it's actually not that hard. And maybe they've even been keeping it to themselves because they want the status. But is there a way for someone new like me or a junior person to get over some of those humps? And is programming actually a magical thing that you do just need to, put in tons and tons and tons of hours and eventually figure it out yourself. Like, I don't know, like, and I guess anything, but what are some of your thoughts around, teaching junior devs, pairing with junior devs, helping junior devs?
So I think one of the most important things for learning in general, and definitely programming in particular, is getting comfortable with realizing that it's going to take a little while and it's going to be kind of painful. It kind of sucks to dive into a new field where you don't feel oriented. You're like, I don't even know where the signs are. I don't know what a road looks like. I'm just super lost. Everything and every time I look into a new thing, I realize that new thing is infinitely deep in itself. And so it's just like, oh, like, what's a database? You're like, oh, well, go ahead and read these 20 books on databases. You're like, what? There's 20 books on databases? It's like, oh, there's 20 books just on like a tiny part of what a database does. It's like, oh my God, no.
Yeah.
And so and that's true for everything in programming. And so like, I think an important trait to develop is just a little bit of grit.
Yeah.
And comfort with being like, you know what? It kind of sucks to learn a brand new thing, particularly when it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just have to live with that suckiness. But also some confidence that like if I keep pushing on it, eventually I'm going to figure it out because it's not a magical thing.
Yeah.
It's not special. It's not different than other things you've learned. You've just probably are a little bit out of practice with being comfortable with not understanding how it works.
Yeah.
Like when you watch little kids try to do a new thing, they fail constantly at it and they don't care. They just like keep trying different variants on it and eventually they figure it out.
Yes.
But adults get less comfortable with that.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It becomes we get afraid to fail at these things and afraid to live with that discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's kind of like a little bit like skateboarding. Like skateboarding, when you're looking at when you see someone do a kickflip, it just seems like that is black magic. Like that is unknowable. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is about the people who around you, like the community, who are willing to demystify things for you, because so much of the barrier is just the mystical nature of that. Now, I'm not a great skateboarder, but one day I had my friend Daryl communicate. Do you skateboard, by the way?
No.
Okay. Dropping in on a ramp, when you are at the top of the ramp, it seems unknowable because everything about it is counterintuitive. You have to, I'll move my fingers here. You have to push all of your weight on the front of the board in order to get it to not wipe out. But every part of your brain is going, no, keep your weight on your back of your leg.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just having somebody there saying, like, this is what your brain is going to do. What you have to do is you just have to force yourself to put all your weight on your front foot. Keep your knees bent, but if you're looking at it from the side, or you're just like you're up there shaking going, oh my God, like I'm going to die. Having someone coach you, it's kind of like pair programming, I guess. Having someone coach you and go, okay, these are the things you need to know. First of all, this is completely doable. Second of all, you just need to put all your weight on your front foot, keep your knees bent. That's it. Like that's all you have to have in your head. And maybe we'll start on this little mini ramp instead of this big half pipe, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it feels like that the community piece is the part that is important. And maybe that's maybe that's why apps like Tuple need to exist, is that we need ways of doing this, because I feel like I'm increasingly feeling like programming is knowable for me. And I've been a geek forever, since 1985. And I'm finally starting to feel like, oh, well, I'm never going to be like an incredible programmer, but I can figure these concepts out. There's no reason I can't.
Yep.
And what's been helpful for me is going live, doing these live streams, and essentially pair programming with whoever shows up.
Totally.
So yeah, it feels like there's something there for sure.
Yeah, man. Like people have been learning from other people since the beginning. Like that's how everyone learned skills before the internet.
Yes.
Basically, was you apprenticed with someone for years.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you knew nothing, and slowly you learned the entirety of your field, and then you took on your own apprentices, and the cycle continued.
Yeah.
And pair programming is just kind of a fancy word for that, which has already been happening for a long time. It's just kind of dressed up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, it turns out like if you want to get good at a thing, doing it with someone that knows how to do it better or is similar to you but it knows different things is really useful because humans are good at communicating with each other and telling each other new information.
Yeah, totally. Ben, this has been awesome. We've been going about an hour.
Yeah.
I want to just be able to publicly tell folks where to go again for all of the stuff you're working on. So tuple.app.
Yep.
Habits for Hackers. How do people find that?
.com.
Oh, habitsforhackers.com. Habitsforhackers.com.
Yep.
Anything else you want to tell people about?
Can
Can you tell people a little bit about Habits for Hackers? Like what's the idea there? Why are you doing that?
So this is a big time for me. I'm trying to make this company work. 2019 is going to be an interesting year. Like we're going to launch our alpha for Tuple January 7th, and like some private betas later on. So it's like I want to really like do well next year, and like have good days and be productive and all that. And the thing I've found for me over time is like focusing on some sort of smallish feeling habits can have big results.
Yeah.
And so I want to have my habits super dialed in next year.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I should get like something that's worked for me in the past is like getting accountability buddy and like checking in on my habits and like just saying what they're going to be and all that.
Yeah.
And as I'm prepping to do all this, I was like, this would make a pretty good course. I bet I'm not the only person that wants to focus on this.
Yes.
And also, hey, like runway matters. And so if I can have a course and make some money off it, that would be great too. So I can keep on working on Tuple and not feel stressed and all that. So kind of all those things came together and I was like, okay, Habits for Hackers. And so basically we're going to spend a month focused on 4 habits and try to get ingrain them, which is getting deep work done each day, like getting in the zone, protecting our bodies like from the ravages of programming. Like don't become a stiff, painful, broken mess by coding all day. Like what do you do to help, not feel like crap?
Yeah.
Optimize workflows, like how do you use your tools better, and also building an audience because building an audience is one of the best things I've ever done for my career. And so I don't want to stop that habit, like keep that going.
Yeah.
And so I figure other people should probably be doing it too.
Yeah. I know we're trying to wind down here, but one thing I want to say about this, and this is more a message to, how old are you, by the way?
35.
You're 35. Okay. So I'm 38. I'm going to set this up by saying, and I talked a little bit about this before, but for years, I was telling myself a story about myself, which was I'm this old, gritty, haggard person who a little bit of an old man on the porch. And the reason I felt like this is because I did a massive career change when I was 28, got into the software world and instantly felt like an old person because all of the other people I was working with were in their early 20s and had been doing it forever.
Yeah.
And so I've constantly had this feeling of these earnest, these young earnest people and their habits and their good daily practices. And I had this kind of grumpy attitude about it. And the old Justin would have looked at Habits for Hackers and would have been like, wow, good for you, Ben. Like, that sounds super great, And I don't think I'm the only one that feels that. I think some people look at something like this and go, there's an earnestness about it that mostly because of ego can turn people off. And the biggest change that's happened for me in the last 12 months has been changing that programming in my head so that when I hear about something like this or, James Clear's book, which you've talked about and you're going to base some of the course on, Atomic Habits, the old me would have been like, good for you, James. Like, I can see you're super disciplined, whatever. That's not for me. And I really want to encourage people that have that programming, that kind of grumpy, like, I'm not going to do that. It's not worth it for me. Or that's only for these kind of people. The if you can change your attitude about these things, like habits in particular is the best way to change your life. And I think some of my attitude was just like, I was just grumpy about my state of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is when you're feeling down and you see someone else succeeding, it's like you don't want to have anything to do with that, but that is the very thing you need. You do need these daily practices, these habits, these things of like you're programming and you've been sitting at your desk for 3 hours and you have a choice. Are you going to go to Little Caesars and get a deep dish pizza, which would be maybe a bad choice for your body? Or are you going to make yourself a salad, which would be a good choice? Those little decisions do matter. And the thing that also helped unlock my thinking is I just kept seeing all the bad choices I made and going, well, what's the point? But what James Clear in his book kind of communicated to me is that, yeah, you make a bad choice. Everyone makes a bad choice. But at that stage, you can make a good choice and turn your day around. And then you can make another good choice and turn your day around. Just because you've made a bad choice doesn't mean you need to beat yourself up. Just like, okay, you had pizza for lunch. Just go for a run. Like, you can make a good choice now. And I think people who have maybe been frustrated in the past about habits, this course, like something like this, might be what you need. Even if you feel grumpy about it, even if you feel like, I don't know, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. There is a way to feel better. And the only thing that's worked for me is like these little habits, these little daily actions that go, okay, what am I going to do next? I'm going to go for a walk. That's like one little action I can take that will make me feel better.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Cosign. It's good.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Anything else you want people to know about?
I do want to just take 1 second and thank the people that are making comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Like Corey Gwynn's been saying some good stuff. He suggested that I publish the retro stuff, which I'm gonna do. I threw it in a gist at one point, but I might put it somewhere a little bit prettier and share it out with people.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And then what else? Josh Manders says we don't look a day over 25, which is very flattering. Appreciate that.
You will not believe the amount of digital real-time filters I've got going on right now.
Oh, that's your secret. Yeah, you really do. I feel like you're cheating. If you're 38, that's ridiculous. I want to know your skincare habits.
Oh, man, I don't know.
Do you live somewhere not sunny? Is that it?
It's quite sunny. Yeah, I don't know. I've never been to Boston, so I don't know what it's like. In the summer, it's like 100 degrees and hot and dry here. Yeah. And right now, it's just above freezing in the valley, but there's snow up on the mountains. So we have seasons. But you have seasons in Boston too, don't you?
Oh, yeah, lots of seasons, definitely.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you look so preserved because you're inside all the time, but sounds like maybe not.
I've always been a late bloomer, so it'll just hit like one day. Like I couldn't grow a beard forever, and then I turned when I turned 35. All of a sudden, it was like, boom! Like I could grow a beard. So, yeah. Thanks to everyone in the chat. If any of you have any last minute questions, I'm going to stick around for a bit. Josh, Ben.
Yeah, I'll stick around too.
But thanks again for being on the show, Ben. Everyone go check out tuple.app. Check out learntopair.com.
Yep. Check
out Habits for Hackers. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for the plugs.
Cool.
Bye.
Yeah, the one thing for me about live that I like is the interactivity, like just being able to see folks react in real time.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a distraction.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But I have this feeling like, just like anything else, going live is a habit, a practice that you can get better at. And I'm trying to, I'm going to watch this back and I'm going to go, there's one part where I'm not looking at Ben because I'm looking over here. It makes a lot more sense for me to just put Ben on screen during those times. And maybe I should also have a note to say before the call goes, say, Ben, sometimes it's going to look like I'm not paying attention, but it's just because I'm looking at the comments or whatever.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a way of just quickly noticing and then incorporating, being okay when comments scroll by and you didn't get a chance to address it. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Sid, we did not forget to turn this off. We're still live, but the official part of the podcast is over.
Cool. Yeah. Now it's just a stream.
Yeah,
dude. I love your programming streams. I mean, not like watching them. That's like way too boring. But like the concept of them.
Yeah. Well,
it's great. I think that's going to become more of a thing.
I hope so. I mean, I think I've been lucky too that there's two things that are working for me. I'm definitely playing a village idiot on those streams. Like I'm playing a character. Mm-hmm. But also having an audience that likes you and shows up and wants to, hang out. Hi, Simon. Good to see you, man. Is really helpful. And then the idea that people are willing to help me live. And like the other day, I think it was Holger in Germany. He's like watching his baby, like putting his baby to sleep.
Yeah.
And he helped me figure out this huge thing in our Rails app. And I didn't completely understand everything that we're doing, but it's very much pair programming. We're both in Visual Studio Code. He's instructing me around.
Yep.
And we went through all that thing. And then the interesting thing for me is I submit a PR to John, and then John, who one of the things I love about John is he has no qualms about just being blunt. And so he'll be like, okay, well, he's like, that's like, I want him to affirm me. I want him to go, Justin, this is magnificent. But he goes, okay, well, that's pretty good, but this is how I would have done it. And then he goes through how he would have done it. And I'm realizing that in some ways, some of those negative qualities we talked about programmers are also necessary. These are the pros and cons, because you can't just do something for the glory. Because if you're looking for glory, you're going to be disappointed all the time because someone's going to go.
So I think John could give you some positive props too.
Are you
seriously,
John? Are you listening to this? Where are you?
Like, I mean, you're doing a hard thing, and I think you deserve those props. And like, when people submit PR, like I had this personal rule when I was reviewing PRs is that I try to find one positive thing to call out explicitly per PR. Mm-hmm. So it's like nice method name. Or like, like this is a smart extraction or whatever. Like just because PRs, like when you go in review mode, you're like, what needs to change? What's not good enough? Mm-hmm. And so if every time you open a PR, all you get are those negatives, you're like, this kind of sucks. It's like hard to like it. And so I try to like mitigate that a little bit. But like, I feel like especially
that's
if you're
a great habit, by the way.
Thanks.
For people to think about. So much of our habits are just having a story in your head of like, oh yeah, Ben does this every time. So everyone listening and watching, every time you open a PR, you got to think of Ben Orenstein. What would Ben do? And you got to think, wait a second, it's easy to criticize, but I'm gonna say something nice.
Yep. And like, I'm not saying like, it's, and like you have to give the feedback. Like the feedback should be there, but like you can also give feedback in a very nice way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, nice job on the start of this. There is one thing I might change that would make it like there's a nice way to say things, and like especially in written form, it's extra important to like be a little extra nice, have some like smiley emojis, and ask questions instead of making statements. One of my former coworkers, Derek Pryor from Thoughtbot, gave a great talk on how to do code reviews. That stuff is worth checking out.
Yeah, I think the other thing that has been incredibly gratifying, and why I would like to continue to demystify. Patio 11 once said to me, he's like, Justin, you've got to talk more about geeks who can't code, because he said, first of all, just having a label for a group of people who feel underrepresented is very powerful. And he said, because I've always felt like, listen, I'm one of you. I am a dyed in the wool geek. Like I love computers. I love making things with computers. I love so much that we've had so many of the same experiences, whether it was, fiddling around with BASIC on a VIC-20 or running a BBS these things are all the same. But there's just this one piece that I didn't get for all sorts of reasons. And it could have just been, I tried to learn Turbo Pascal myself as a 12-year-old kid, and I just had no help. And I lived in the country, and I couldn't do it. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the only reason.
Yeah.
But the one reason I'm getting so passionate about this idea of, for myself, saying, I'll swear now, fuck it. Like, I'm going to figure this out, because when I get something started in Transistor, even if I just get it started, like I just know enough that I can create a new view in Rails, and I can copy some of the template code that John had before and paste it in and delete the parts I know are just like content loops or whatever. And I can kind of gussy it up and have John see it. And John goes, oh my gosh, this is great. And then he takes it and then brings it the next step. And then it goes live. I mean, there's so much of that is incredibly gratifying. And when you're a co-founder or you're working on a product, or even if you are a marketing person working for a startup or product company, for you to be involved in the process is so important. In the same way that I think developers should be involved when they want to in the product talks and the marketing talks and all those other things. There's no reason that these two groups cannot be more in each other's world. John's always going to be a better programmer than me, for sure. And when it comes to certain things like whatever it is, talking to people at a conference, I'm going to kick his ass every time. Like, it's not even but that doesn't mean we can't play in each other's playgrounds.
Totally. Yeah. It makes life more interesting anyway.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I'm glad you folks enjoyed this. Thanks again, everyone who showed up on YouTube, on Twitter, via Periscope, and on Twitch. By the way, if you could do me a favor, if you are on YouTube, subscribe so that you get notified next time I go live. Same on Twitch and on Periscope. I think you can follow me there or just follow me on Twitter. But it's a nice way for you to get notified, and I like doing these things, and I want more folks to know about people like Ben. So
yeah, thanks. And Ryder, I appreciate the comment about Art of Product. Glad you're liking it.
Yes.
Definitely going to keep sharing the stories.
Yeah.
I think I'll be running that podcast for a long time.
Yeah. What's great about it is you've really figured out this art of conversation, I think.
Thank you.
And you and Derek are a little bit more even keel. Like, my problem is I talk too much. Even when I try to hold myself back, I talk too much. But you two are much more evenly matched in that category. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, can't you just not?
Can I just not talk?
No, just not talk too much. If you feel like it's too much, can't you just do less?
You really sound like my wife right now.
Well, it's just like, it's that thing of like, I'm bad at X. You're just like, okay, well, I guess that's true forever. There's no way to change that. You're
absolutely right. I have been I'm getting better. The one thing I've realized is, especially if you listen to early episodes of Build Your SaaS with John and I, when I hear a space, I want to fill it.
Yeah.
But John needs about 3 to 5 seconds before he speaks. And so I've had to learn, and I'm still not great at this, but I've had to learn to I'm learning to stop and just go and wait and be okay with just silence. And then he speaks. Or even like saying, the other thing that he's not good at is like sometimes he needs to think about it for a week and then we can talk about it in a certain way.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I like that. I'm getting better at that. Like I recorded another podcast this morning, and there's this habit I have of like getting to the end of a sentence and then being like, well, that didn't sound like an ending, so let me kind of restate my point again.
Yes.
But like in a kind of ad hoc weird way.
Yeah.
And now I just try to like get to the end and stop.
Yes. Yeah, it's a weird feeling. One thing that's really helped is when I listen to other podcasts and I can hear people like me that drone on too long and how frustrating that is to hear that. And so that's my new trigger as I go, wait, and being okay with almost an abrupt stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can just leave it.
Yeah.
It's fine. Plus, you can edit after the fact. So if you end up with a weird break where both of you are looking at each other, not sure what to say, you can just edit that out later. It's fine.
Yes, I know. Yeah, it is kind of like learning to dance with another partner. Because
Sure.
You know, there would be some other people that would be way more, you know, like we can go back and forth.
Yeah.
But learning to dance with John has been great because now, like the fun part is that when now that he's in his groove, the show is way better. He's way more involved. He's like, you know, just hearing, yeah. Anyway, thanks, folks. I'm going to end the stream right now.